some very good research that has looked into very ancient societies that were supposedly matriarchal societies that were run by women quite openly. And it seems that some of that research has shown that the ancient matriarchies actually were quite bloody and violent in their operation. And this kind of thing is really not talked about a lot from a psychological point of view and from the point of view of where women supposedly stand in our society today.
That's exactly right. I'm glad you brought that up. The man who actually discovered this, it was his lifelong study, was the anthropologist, scientist called J.J. Bachofen. This is what people need to look this name up. J.J. Bachofen, Bacofen, and then try to find me any of his books in translation in English. His work was suppressed. It's because he, in fact, was the pioneer. A few others, like Maria Gimbutas, took it off later on, but even then it flagged. And then the last thing that you have is Joseph Campbell, the famous American scholar, making brief allusions to it, nothing in depth, although he refers to J.J. Bachofen's work and also laments that the work is not properly translated. So in the case of those who've really cracked any type of historical code or symbolic code, like the Swallow the Lubitches or the J.J. Bachofens, you will find that their work doesn't get any credence and is hardly known to the world. Yet, people from their own universities, contemporaries who wrote a lot of rubbish that the establishment thought, yeah, this is wonderful, they're now household names and taught to every school child. So this is, of course, a problem that when you start studying those people who looked into the matriarchy, whether it was of the Amazons or Lesbos or whoever, whatever group, or even, as you say, the matriarchal age. And remember, we're not talking about that any patriarchal age is necessarily idyllic, nor are we going to say that any matriarchal epoch is idyllic. They have, every age is fraught with war and bloodshed and what have you. But it certainly helps to study the matriarchal age because it will disavow people of any illusions that they have regarding the ferocity of the female, and just simply going into mythology alone leaves an objective student, you see, wondering what is really going on here, and why it is that in one sense we can think of ancient goddesses as being the keepers of light and being great mothers, the Isis, the loving mothers like the Hathors, but then we read about the dark side of these goddesses and how ferocious it was, particularly goddesses like Sekhmet. But all of them, even Hathor, even Isis, have a dark side, a potentially even evil side. And then the arising of the whole question of the lunar cult and their worship of the number 13. Incidentally, there's 13 levels of the famous pyramid. 13 is all over the dollar bill. As I said, we know, don't we, that so many people have delved into this. We have so many people in the conspiracy movement who have analyzed the number 13 involving itself in the appearing on the dollar bill, including the 13 material layers of the pyramid, the 14th being a sort of a two-dimensional, almost immaterial capstone. But how many people who have gone into great depth talking about that mention that it's a lunar number? It takes 13 months for the moon to go through the zodiac, 12 of the famous months that make the year. That's the sun's transit. But the moon takes a little bit longer. So from time immemorial, both the monthly passage of the moon has been always 13 phases, halfway through the year, halfway through the month. And then also 13 is the famous number of the lunar cult. Mary Magdalene was the 13th disciple. So everywhere you look at the 13, even in official Catholic iconography, you will find that it refers to the female. So then I want to know, why did the founding fathers, or whoever brought this pyramid symbol, and the eagle with its 13 leaves, 13 berries, 13 clouds, 13 letters in the whatever, the Great Seal or whatever it might be. I'm wondering then why it wasn't 14, 15, 16, 12, 11, 10. Why this famous female number? And in fact, then you find out that before they were going to use the eagle, they were going to use the vulture. And then even before that, the phoenix. The phoenix is a female symbol. It's always been used as a female symbol. So is the pelican. So is the vulture. The vulture is one of the most ancient symbols of the goddess Mut, going back to Egypt thousands of years before. So every time you turn around and look at the real occult symbolism, you keep seeing this crossover into the female symbolism. But then they put the sun in the front and talk about, the solar cult and the males and the Akhenatons and stuff. And of course that does the trick. We don't look any deeper. We don't look into who Nefertiti was and where she ended up. We don't check, into the story of the famous figures of history. We again do this thing that every cop is likely to do. Oh, it's a chick. Okay, here you go. Drive on. Have a nice day. I mean, there's something about our psyche, partly out of virtue, understandably. But whenever there's a female crime, we're always trying to find excuses. We're always trying to find exonerating circumstances, mitigating circumstances. And I think that, that's all right when it's given out parking tickets. As John Wayne once said, I can always forgive a woman one murder. Great joke. But I'm not talking about I'm not talking about the malls and sort of that type of level. I'm not talking about your Eileen Warnosses. I'm talking about your Circes, your Pandoras, and some very heavy-duty stuff going all the way back. I want to know why the Genesis story got created. Why are they saying that a woman was cause of the fall? Maybe she's not. In my first book, I took up the idea that is a complete and utter distortion of the facts. And that, in fact, the Lady Eve, one very powerful interpretation, is that she was disobedient towards the Atlanteans and led man, Adam, to safety, led him to his freedom, led him to his enlightenment. And that the serpent was nothing more than a code word for the great scientists of the Nephilim, who, having a schism between themselves, fell out. And then they have a description of the division into what I call the Atlanteans and the Lemurians. And the women being very important, a group of women anyway, being very important in making sure that a great deal of their fellows were saved and moved to the continent of Lemuria, which even means the motherland of humanity, the land of the immortal serpents, known down through all of Eastern iconography and history to be Mahadevi, right, the land of the goddess, in which civilization was created. So we have a huge faction of women who decided to not go along with the alien agenda and to serve their brothers. And we have these women talked about very heavily in the Celtic and the Irish legends, Celtic and pre-Celtic, very much so. We have these women, these priestesses, servants of their tribe, servants of their people, custodians of freedom, custodians of, and vigilant warrior queens, right? We have them mentioned in the Edda, the Norse Edda. We have them mentioned in the Mahabharata. And how they even trained their children, how they even brought up their kids, trained their children to be champions of their people. So I'm not in any sense of the word a misogynist who's sort of implicating all women in some sort of hideous conspiracy against mankind. Never will I allow anyone to be so crude as to try and silence me with that old one. That's a dead horse. We're looking in the occult, not official histories of the world. And this is, like I say to Jews, you better learn about the Zionist conspiracy in your midst. So I say to women, you better wake up and assist in this process. You better do your homework. Find out that there's been some evil going on. Don't just use the old standard, look at the evil males. You may be committing a moral crime by doing that. You may be creating a historical model. You may be making a deep affront to truth by constantly blaming men for the crimes that have been done towards you. What happens if there's something more sinister? It's like I said in another interview, we're facing on the battlements of the castle when all along up on the hill, right, in their pavilions on their horseback, watching the whole drama, just like I said, those aliens watching Captain Kirk doing his little dance, having his little romances and trying to save the world. And all the time he's following out their greater plan. So it is, there's a higher force. This 14th level of the pyramid, this immaterial level of the pyramid is not even earthly. It's not even something that thinks in a three-dimensional way. It's something infinitely more sinister. And this is our perfect time for us now to start getting an insight into how it works.
Yes, I think so. And I think you brought up so many great points that people can research and look into. And, of course, also with a great deal of looking forward to your work on the female Illuminati, because the fact that we've seen in our society in particular, but everywhere around the world, there also seems to be a certain, psychological condition placed on women to a certain extent, where they are seen as the quote-unquote fairer sex, and that they occupy a certain psychological position and role and what have you. And I think that it's very important that we could also look at the research that you're doing into the female that may be behind some of the ruling classes and the people running the show, that could also be behind a lot of the negative pressure that's placed on women and the negative psychological drama that goes into women's lives. And that can be used as a powerful tool to help women as well. And it can be a positive thing, the type of research you're looking into, in helping women today realize that a lot of things that they are struggling under from a psychological point of view may ultimately come from something that has been done against them, and That's that right. They may be able to work that out in some fashion by coming to terms with that and realizing that it's not a natural state for them to be in, i.e. powerless or being in relationships with men who abuse them and things of this nature, which seem to be so very common, in our society, that they may be put into those positions because of pressures from outside that have so ingrained themselves in our culture just by the rulers, the people behind the scene, the Illuminati, if you want to call them that are behind the scenes, who are driving history and the driving force behind world events and culture and the formation of states and all of that. And it may be a very powerful force for good as well. And one thing, too, that you brought up, which is a very important point for people to keep in mind, and that is the fact that there seems to be this sense of people having blinders on when it comes to looking at issues like this. When you see so many researchers who get involved in the study of alternative history and the type of things that you study, Michael, and that you have brought forward in all of your great works, there are very little women involved in this field. That's one thing. The second thing is that there seems to be little emphasis being placed in any sense on women by people within this research community. And the other thing is that the blinders keep that aspect out, but also there is this idea that everything is in the West. It's all Western. There's nothing, the East might as well not even exist as far as any of this research goes, because people don't even spend the time to look into the ancient history of the East, into ancient China and India and the whole of Southeast Asia, the whole of Russia, even, for that matter. There's so much there that needs to be looked into, that needs to be brought to light to understand this whole phenomenon on a global scale. We can't just be limited in looking here in the West and think that all the answers are going to be found there.
Or even looking at a thing out of fear. People now are being forced, not because they want to. Part of that blinkers you're talking about is because people only even start to even look at this information, not because they want to, but because they have to. If the world that they're living in doesn't make sense anymore, and this conspiracy stuff is now on the table, so they go and browse it, they learn a few lines, they read some labels, but they're not in love with the facts, they're not in love with truth. All they want to spend their time is debunking those people who are doing this arduous work.